Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Think with a Drink. This is the weekly show brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. And this week's show, Craig, I'm very, very excited for this one. This one is called How to Handle Your Retirement Plan in a Market Downturn. If you want to throw that slide up just to give the graphic with that, that would be appreciated as everybody can see it. But it's how do we handle protect the portfolio, specifically when we're talking about retirement plans, retirement planning, near or pre-retirees from a market downturn.
Yeah, it's not good to lose your money right before you want to use it, right?
No, that is not a good thing at all in terms of dealing with that. And so, next slide, just real quick for those who don't know us, my name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in financial services now for 25 years. Those letters after my name just let you know that I am actually a certified fiduciary, which just means that whenever I'm sitting down with somebody, I always have to be acting in their best interest when I'm giving guidance or advice. I want to have my Vice President, Craig, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Craig Richardson, Vice President of the ARIES Foundation. I've been in financial services over 20 years now, and I specialize in working with families and individuals to help them define their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
And so Craig will be chiming in with me as we go along here. If you can, to the next slide. As we said, the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education, we are a 501c3, a recognized nonprofit dedicated to the mission of trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. You can find us on the web. It's ariesfoundation.org. We'll have ways to contact us at the end, but the idea is that we're here just to give some guidance, give a little bit of advice, try to answer questions and help out in any way that we can.
Yep.
One of the ways we do that, and the fun thing for us here now with this, is that Think with a Drink is meant to be a more casual, more relaxed, an easier way to consume some of this financial and money matters, because let's face it, that stuff always gets bogged down in a lot of jargon and technology and terminology.
Yeah, no one wants to talk about money. So.
No one wants to talk about it. So what we have for you today, I'm going to pour you one, Craig.
Great.
What we're drinking it's called Gangster Duck. Go figure that one out. But it's Gangster Duck, and Gangster Duck is a red ale. So red ales are going to be a little bit darker, a little bit hoppier. This one specifically is very hoppy.
Okay.
That one's for you. The idea with a red ale, it's caramel usually, more malts, tend to be for more barbecue, burgers, that type of thing. You're going to get some of that bite, some of that taste for everything. And then I should be all set here.
Okay. The Hoppy Gangster Duck.
Yes. Skull. So the idea is to have a sip, listen in, figure out some of the questions that you might have and how we might be able to help you out. So next slide here, we're going to go through the agenda, what we're going to cover in all of this. But why a market downturn? What is it? Why is it important? How does it impact your retirement planning? Some of the strategies to be thinking about, some of the stuff that you can do to sort of protect from that end of it.
Good.
To think about it. And then, think about planning ahead, right? So again, for somebody who might be in their 30s or 40s,
right,
a market downturn really shouldn't be. I mean, it scares people and it gets impactful, but it's not really that devastating to somebody who's got 20, 30 years to go until they need those funds.
Actually, a market downturn in somebody in that position might actually be beneficial.
Might be beneficial because you could buy in that situation.
Correct, yes.
And so, one of the things with that is to be thinking about, but if somebody is in a near-term, close pre-retiree, near retiree, or getting to that point, you really need to be thinking about this because the impact can be devastating on your retirement plan.
Sure can be.
Okay, so next slide. So what is a market downturn? What is it? What does that mean when we say a market downturn? So generally looked at as a decline of more than 20% in a market, so what's known as a bear market for those playing along at home. And what you see on the screen there, it gives you the downturns that have occurred since 1987. Right, so what you see is 1987, otherwise known as Black Monday. That's October of 1987. Then we had the years, the 2001 to 2003.
Yeah.
Then we had the recession, 2007 to 2009. Then again with COVID in 2020.
Right.
And each of these, as you go along, there's nothing that really says, hey, this is going to happen next
Tomorrow,
year,
right.
or the next day or next year or whatever. There's triggers that occur and there's some build up to it, but it's one of those things from, hey, if I'm trying to plan for this, or I was planning on retiring, if I retired in 2000 or in 2007 or in 2019, basically the impact on my retirement plan was devastating.
Oh yeah, it was, absolutely.
I'm sipping, hold on.
Yeah, you go ahead and sip. And part of that is because you were taking money out right when you needed it.
Right. You were definitely, and that's what we want to get to. So yes, so if you could pull up the slide here, because we want to talk about how this all impacts your retirement plan. So what we have on the screen, we're going to use these are siblings. This is Bill and his younger sister Jill. And so both of them have, at the time they retire, to set the scenario up, $1 million in their account.
Good for them.
Good for them, right? They've invested. They are invested exactly the same way, right? So their strategy is they're both invested in the same way. Their both plan is to take 4% with adjusting for a little bit for inflation as they go. So what is known as the 4% rule for anybody who knows that or has been involved.
Who's that old? Who knows about the 4%
Yes,
rule?
who's that old? Yes. But if you can bring that slide back up again, just so everybody can see that again in terms of the visual there, right? So then the idea is Bill is going to retire in 1996.
Okay.
Because Jill is younger, she does not retire until 1999.
All right.
They're on the same, again, invested the same way. The portfolios are set up the same, and they are taking out the same withdrawal. Both have $1 million, which is $40,000 plus a little adjustment for inflation when they retire. So everything, if you just said, look, all things being equal and everything being the same, then they should be fine in terms of the end result.
So in other words, if Bill's all set, then Jill should be all set. They have exactly the same portfolios, same balances, everything. Yeah.
That's the way it should work when you look at it, right? The idea, and that's sort of what you get told in all of this, is everybody says, hey, look, just do this and you'll be fine, right? And everything will be all set. But let's take a look at what happened with the next slide in terms of going through that.
Hey,
so what happens in that scenario is Bill, who's got all smiles, he's bright and smiley there and everything, because Bill by 2018 has taken out $1.2 million from his account. That's the $40,000 a year plus adjusted for inflation. So he's taken out close to $1.2 million, and sitting in his account at that time is $1.7 million.
Wow.
So he's not only lived the life he wanted to live, but he's taken care of and probably will not outlive his money now. He's got more money than he can spend in terms of what he's dealing with.
Almost twice what he started with, yeah.
Jill, who again, same scenario, same situation, $1 million in the account, by 2018 now, adjusting for inflation, has withdrawn about the $1 million.
Okay.
Right? But in her account, she has $170,000. Not 1.7 million.
Whoops.
Right?
How did that happen?
So, and we'll go through that in a second with what happened. But if you just follow along with that and trying to really be specific with this in terms of the example of these two individuals, right? So one of them, nothing more than just retiring while the markets were still running up. The other one retired right going into the market decline. And so what you see is the outcome that occurs and how we deal with that. And so if you want to pull up the next slide, because it sort of gives you the visual on it, Bill represents the green line where he had those first years of returns. Then he had the downturn that occurred 2002, 2001 to 2003, and then the markets pretty much ran again through. There was a little dip in there, we know, in terms of the recession, but he was able to handle it.
Right.
Jill, who retired in 1999, went right into the .com, the tech bubble burst,
Right.
and was never able to recover from there.
Because she was pulling money out during the recovery.
She was pulling out with money in recovery. So we call this, it's sequence of risk return is what this is about, but it's the idea and the concept that regardless of the portfolio and what I'm taking, I can be subject to this downturn, this problem happening with my account where I didn't ever plan for it.
Right, because when they do a lot of these projections, they assume, well, you're going to get, if you take out 4%, as long as I'm making 5 or 6% over on the average, then I'm fine. But they use a straight line projection, which assumes you're going to get that 6% every year. But that's not the case.
Right.
Sequence of return risk says, I don't know what years are going to be up, and I don't know what years are going to be down. So the average is not necessarily going to work out for me. As you can see, it didn't work out for Bill and, well, it worked out for Bill, but not for Jill.
Right, for Bill, but not for Jill in that scenario. And so it's sort of the conversation, like we said, for somebody who's 30, 40 years old, like this isn't really, yes, you should still be aware in market downturns, and we'll talk about, other shows with hedging and things like that. But the reality is, for somebody who's at or near retirement, this conversation really has to be, how am I going to protect that portfolio?
Right.
Because you don't know when you're going to step into it. 2019, we didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. We didn't know we were going to have this huge market downturn that occurred. But that's what happens. And if you run into that, it's like at least once in the first 3 or 5 years or something like that. That's when the scenario really compounds itself. But if you have more than one downturn,
Right.
that's it. You flatline. Right? You run into a major issue with that. And so the idea and to be thinking about it and be saying, well, gee, this is how it's run for 20 years. Everything is fine. Everything is good. And that's really the reality for a lot of people, like Craig said, is if you're just thinking of this, that this is what it's going to get every year, that doesn't happen.
Right, and I do see a lot of, just strictly investment advisors try to think that you can just deal with everything through investments. And I think investments are fantastic. It's a great way to build up assets. But when you start talking about distribution, just investment strategy alone may not necessarily solve the problem.
Right. Right, and so it's getting into that thought process of, okay, all right, so I need to be thinking, what can I do? How am I able to make this happen? And what are the different ways? And so as part of that, when we go into it, and if you can bring the slide up so that we have that, right? So the idea here, and we're going to leave this up for a while just because we're going to go through each of these and touch on them one by one as far as ways to protect your account, ways to protect the strategy. The first one says diversification.
Right.
Well, diversification really is not only the idea of, hey, I'm holding different assets,
Right.
but I'm holding different types of accounts, different types of holdings, because if everything is subject to stock market declines, then everything's going to decline.
So you want to be in what we technically call market segments. You want to be in different market segments.
Yeah.
Technology and what other segments would there be?
Yeah. No, so we have defensive on there.
Okay.
That's another one in terms of the nature and the cycle in terms of going through it. But so you want to be diversified. You don't want to have what is the old adage there, all your eggs in one basket, right? That type of thing. So, diversification is important, but it's also important to be diversifying, as we were talking about, that we're not just in stocks, that we're in bonds, that we're in not just bonds, but maybe we're also in cash. Maybe that we're in cash, that we're also in some other asset. We got another show coming up that you can check out about, gold or crypto, but, different ways of handling that in terms of it.
Yeah, and I know some people too are a little bit against mutual funds, but I think part of that is it allows you to diversify into lots of different organizations without having to sink tons and tons of money.
Right.
As
Well,
opposed to
that's a
buying
way to spread
individual
yourself
stocks.
out. Right. Yeah. So the individual holdings that are inside there are a way to do it. The other one, the next one on there was rebalancing. I don't think rebalancing gets done enough a lot of times because specifically if we're talking about when we're dealing with retirement accounts. Because retirement accounts, most of the time what happens is the average participant, and again, generalization here, don't take this personally in terms of going through it, but the idea is that, hey, I opened my account statement and it was either more than it was last time or less than the last time.
My only litmus test, right?
And then it sort of goes into the drawer or into the shredder or whatever happens to it, without the conversation being, well, gee, if I have more than one fund in my retirement account portfolio, did one fund perform better than the other?
Always. Right.
Generally, that's what's probably going to happen. So if I've got 4 funds and they're each holding a quarter of my portfolio, 25, 25, 25, 25, 1 year from now, 4 funds, they're not all going to have 25%.
No.
Something's going to have done good, something's going to have done not so good. And the conversation with investors, again, any age now, doesn't really matter retirement investors, but it's just about any age, is at some point, we need to resegment, we need to rebalance that all back to 425s. And it's the idea of I'm selling what did good,
Yeah.
and I'm buying what did bad.
Well, which is counterintuitive, right? If this made me a lot of money, why don't I want to put all my money into the thing that made me a lot of money?
It's running up. Why don't I stay
Exactly.
there?
What kind of advice, voodoo magic is this you're talking about?
What are you doing? Yeah. But the idea and the concept here is, if you think about it, this is the adage, which is sell high and buy low. That's what you're doing in that scenario. Now, a lot of times with a retirement account, 401k, 403b, that type of thing, there are automatic levers that you can have. There's a way to set that up in the system. Most retirement plan providers today have an automatic rebalancing feature, so something that you can absolutely take advantage of. Can you bring the slide back up for us real quick? So the idea of a discretionary fund, and the concept here is that, a lot of times as retirees, they may be trying to generate income, at the same time they're trying to save for the future,
Right.
and then also have money set aside for something else. And the problem with that is it's fine, but if we're trying to do it all from the same asset, it makes it very, very difficult, because I can't really spend $1 today and have $1 tomorrow.
Yeah, basically when we look at retirement planning, I look at it in 4 different stages for everybody. I look at the first thing has got to be income. Do I have enough money to get me through till the end? I have enough, more money than life. That's the important thing, right? I got to have $1 left when I die.
Right.
And so first you got to have, can your assets generate enough income? The next thing you need to do is liquidity, that discretionary money. Because as we all know, unexpected things happen. You may get sick, your kids may need help. There's all kinds of, just a wedding that you weren't planning to have to go to. All these different things happen when you're going through life. So having that discretionary, that liquidity is important for those things that come up. The next thing is protection, right? We don't get into here, but it's just part of the retirement process that sometimes that discretionary money is used in that protection process. And then there's legacy, if there's anything left, which maybe there will be, maybe there won't. What do you want to see happen to it?
Maybe they want to leave money, maybe they don't, right? Maybe they feel like the kids have got enough, or the beneficiaries have enough, and whatever the case may be there with that.
But the first step we're talking about today is that income piece, right?
Right.
And we got to solve that first. And that's how we talk about this, 401k, how to handle a downturn, and how to make that money last.
Right. And the idea of setting up the discretionary subset of that is just like Craig was talking about. So if I have my income, which is fine, but I need to have that additional spending. So it can't come from the same bucket that's generating my income, because then I'm going to be taken away from my income.
Well, that discretionary cash may also be helpful in a downturn. Rather than pulling the money out of my 401k in a downturn and killing off all those soldiers that are supposed to be working for me, maybe I take the money out of a discretionary cash account that isn't invested and save myself some tax money and let that money recover.
Right. Right. The next one is defensive assets, and this is what Craig had alluded to with about investing in different types of funds in nature. Healthcare. Those type of things. These defense stuff that's always going to be needed. They're more apt to be beneficial when downturns happen. So they're ways to offset the portfolio and problems inside the portfolio. Again, just another way of diversifying the assets, so we're not all just sitting in the S&P 500 and then letting whatever happens happen.
Yeah, like in downturns, those staples come into place. People are going to eat, right? They're going to use consumable goods. So those markets, you tend to do better through the downturns, where tech and all those tend to tumble down. Just the opposite when things start going up the other way. So it's just good to have a defensive strategy.
Right. Yeah. And so the other one on there is delaying Social Security, right? So one of the things with this that comes into especially when we're talking to close to retirement retirees, is that it's what is the latest statistics? Because I know we're going through this. It was like 6 years, right? The average person retires 6 years earlier than what they had originally planned for.
Because they want out.
Right? Well, they want out. They're tired of doing it. Maybe they're sick. Maybe the company that has something to do with that. And there's all sorts of factors that go along with it. But the idea here is that we were expecting to work until 65, 67, whatever the number is. But now it's 63 and I'm now out of work and I've got to start drawing income. And so the idea is if we can delay Social Security, delaying Social Security just creates more income for us later on. And retirement is all about income, right? Income, it's all about cash flow. Cash flow equals certainty. Certainty takes the pressure off of money. This is something we talk about all the time, is the idea here of being able to do that, have that available for everything. So if you can, and that becomes a little bit of a bridging thing, right, with Social Security?
Yeah, and I think the bigger part too, and it's going to come up in the next one, so I'm not trying to talk ahead to it, but it's really about planning. Because sometimes when we retire early, it's not because we decided we wanted to. Sometimes it could be a health issue. Sometimes you got let go from a job that you weren't expecting to get let go from. And so you're kind of forced into a situation. And so now you're juggling, and now you're trying to make things work. The worst scenario is when someone comes to me at 65 saying, I was planning to retire at 65 and I can't.
Yeah.
Right, so that's even worse. So really, it's about planning as far in advance as you possibly can. And if that's just next year, because you're retiring next year, it's still not a bad thing to start figuring out what can you do.
Yeah.
So there's never too late to plan, but the more earlier you do it, the more options you're going to have. Because the best scenario, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The best scenario is to be saying, I don't have to retire, but I'd like to and I can.
Right. I can pull the ripcord. I can get out now. That's what I want to do. And the last one on there really is more about the income thing, right? Trying to generate this income. It's using these income annuities for that. So, however you stand or say or want to deal with annuities, they get all sorts of press, good, bad, different, all over the place. Generally, when we're looking at solving retirement income, that's what they're really intended for. That's what it is. It's an income stream. I mean, Social Security is an annuity. A corporate pension is an annuity. These are payouts that are guaranteed that are going to get paid. So, how you feel about an annuity is a different thing. This is about income. So that's why when you see all that stuff with, I hate annuities or all of that thing, that it's like, okay, so then you hate Social Security because that's an annuity.
Well, the fodder that's out there is actually justified because, annuities, if you're not putting them together right, cannot be unbeneficial. And there's a lot of people out there who've taken advantage of getting big paydays off of putting somebody into an annuity.
Right.
And it may or may not have benefited the person that, they had to put the money in, which is why we have fiduciary responsibility now. Right?
Exactly.
However, structured correctly, and there are so many different types and ways of structuring annuities. It's not really something you just go out and pick off the shelf and buy.
Yes.
You really want to be working with somebody who's working in your best interest, understands how retirement cash flows work and distribution of funds, and how this can link into both your welfare but the welfare of your family and other people.
Right, and that's sort of what we were talking about from the get-go with the beginning of it, where we were saying about the whole concept and idea of diversification. The diversification is not only inside a portfolio, but it's of all of the holdings of the assets as well. And that's the idea is I've got some in stocks, I've got some in bonds, maybe I've got some that are generating income for me, and different ways of having that because that all offsets. And it takes away from this concern of, the market's going to slide on me, or am I worried about a downturn? Well, not if I have this income coming in, like a pension or Social Security, I've got that guarantee. I don't have to worry now.
Well, I mean, for those of you who know people who have pensions, or especially the old pensions, like the old, GM pension
GE.
or GE, right? Nobody ever said, I wish I didn't have this pension,
right?
Nobody says, oh God, I get sick of this check coming in every month. You got military pension, teachers' pensions, firefighters' pensions. Those, they love, they love their pension money. But what happens is there's less companies giving pensions. So now it's on you, once again, as an individual, to set up your own personal pension. And that's what you're talking about here, is having that security and assurance.
Next slide. So next slide, this is just a quick tip for everybody out there in terms of thinking about this, but it's doing reviews, right? That seems pretty self-explanatory, but again, surprising number of people who don't actually go in and review not only their accounts, but for us, the idea and the concept is also to be reviewing your spending. Especially if, like Craig was talking about, those who are a year or that time frame to retirement, like getting a handle on, gee, this is what we've been spending, right? We got to figure this out in terms of what it's doing, because that's pretty much the practical part in starting all of this, is to figure out what am I spending and how am I going to solve that need.
Yeah, so you don't want to be figuring this out once you have a fixed income that, wow, I really don't have enough. And the first thing I usually put my clients through is making sure, let's figure out your spending now so we know approximately what it's going to be in retirement. It'll always be a little bit different because you're retired. Your habits are changing, you're doing different things. It takes about 6 months to a year to really get your handle on it, but you don't want to be totally shocked and surprised.
Right. Yeah. Next slide. So this one isn't really, and this has nothing to do with us, just so we're clear. This isn't, hey, we're pitching us here, but generally the idea and concept is if you sit down with a financial professional, right, and generally you are going to get somebody who's going to help you craft a plan that's going to fit your needs. They're going to take some of the emotion out of the equation, generally a sounding board or just somebody to say, wait, I don't know that you should really be, pulling the trigger, selling this, buying that type of thing. It's because a lot of what we do in investing is emotional. And they'll generally set you up for a long-term plan. That is the idea behind this. Next slide. All right, so some key takeaways here for this, right? Just, understand the risk that you're taking. That's a big part of it. Set your goal. Decide how you're going to reevaluate. That's that ongoing process that happens. And then always, always, always have a plan, put something in place, because that's the worst thing you can do is say, okay, I want to do all this and then take no action whatsoever.
Yeah, even if it's not a fully formulated plan, at least start moving on something.
Right. Next slide. So for anybody who ever has any questions, any concerns on anything, look, we're here to answer questions. As we said, the whole idea is really to try to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. If you're watching this on TV, hit the pause button, take out your phone, shoot the QR code. That's going to open up our calendar. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Chat just to answer some questions, give you a little bit of guidance, a little bit of help. Next slide. If you ever want to do, one thing you can do for us is follow us, whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, we're all out there. If you do have a question, you can shoot us. The email is info@ariesfoundation.org.
Yeah.
And on that, we are going to say thanks and have a good night.